So the final session, or the final panel session today, and the best one I think we've kept to last. I wrote a book called Procurement with Purpose a few years ago, and I'm fascinated to tap into two of the world's experts in circular design, circular supply chain design. Mitch, Sushma, it's great to have you here. I think what we really good, we get kind of a bigger view of circularity and circular supply chains, and then let's explore some of the gaps, the opportunities that we need to close as organizations start thinking about how they can embed circular supply chains in their organizations. And I'd love to get some examples of companies who are really at the forefront of this as well, and how our guests here can take some action as well. So Mitch, I'd love if maybe you can kind of leverage your background in UN and BSAF and so forth to tell us a little bit more about where circular is at the moment and where the policies are going as well.
Well, thank you. It's very nice to be here, and it's an honor to be here with you as well. I did spend time at the United Nations, and you know, that is a venue where you try to solve the big problems that aren't solved by your day-to-day business processes. You know, and so you just take a step back and look at the systematic issues. The challenge is always bringing it back to reality and looking and making sure that the solutions are fit for purpose for an actual kind of commercial concern. So you can't rely on the private sector to deliver all these social goods if you don't understand the incentive systems within businesses. So I had a business career before that, and I left the UN to pursue that more strategically in the chemical industry, because I found that the chemical industry is so critical to so many of our industries. And if we get chemistry right, and if we understand how to look backwards down our supply chains and get transparency, we'll be able to make much better business decisions. And I know our theme here is AI, and I think a lot of the challenges of getting this right is just there's way too many variables. You know, there's too many incentives, there's too many conflicting incentives, and I think we're now, you know, that we're meeting a technology when we need it most. When we're looking at this very complex system, linear supply chains capture one moment in time, but the molecules that are used for products have an almost infinite ability to be reused. And so it's a tragedy that our limited business kind of cycle understanding can't allow us to better use those molecules again and again. And so that's where I hope we have some value from AI. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Maybe Sushma, you can expand on that.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me here, and pleasure to be here with you as well. See, the reality is the global demand for raw materials is going to double by 2050. So that's you know, researched, proven statistic, and there is an economic opportunity here as well. So according to a particular study, there $1.5 trillion of value can be unlocked through circular economy. And you know, Mitchell here mentioned there are many variations. Products that are produced once are thrown away, and value is recognized only once. So circular economy and circular supply chains give you this potential of monetizing from what you've produced multiple times, right? There are secondary markets out there that are benefiting and you know, gaining this value for the products that have been produced. So why not the producers themselves can, you know, reap that benefit? Yesterday, we had a lot of speakers who, you know, spoke about how to reimagine your procurement playbook, right? Like the procurement playbook that exists today should become more of a reference material. So this is an opportunity. It's actually an amazing opportunity with AI and agentic orchestration tools that are, you know, leveraging that as you reimagine your, you know, business flow and your process flow. Could you introduce circular thinking into your workflows? So that's what I'm most excited about at this moment in time, to leverage these technologies to help make these decisions and bring that change about.
Yeah, I think that reimagining the procurement role and having circularity at the center of it is key. I think your point around the development of products as well, I think we do need to look at the planned obsolescence that are sometimes built into our products.
Yes.
I'd love to see how I could fix my iPhone and every time I break it myself, but I won't get there yet. But the opportunity around circularity, I mean, it's been a conversational piece for a long time. but there's obviously some challenges in terms of organizations moving from the concept of that to look at the opportunities and building this new world. Maybe we could start looking at some of those gaps that we have, from policy to how companies can adopt it. Mitchell, do you want to kick off on that one?
Well, sure. I think a traditional gap analysis, you look at all of the factors that might impact a business and how many of them you actually have enough information to control. I think we have a mix now of some gaps that are sizable and we don't have answers for. But I think the interesting thing is we have developed some answers on the technology side to close the gaps of what's possible. And I don't think that's been well internalized into the policymaking practices. So for example, in the chemical industry, there's always been a frustration with the limited amount of recycling that goes on, especially in this country. And that mostly is because the technologies that were used and have been developed over the past decades are okay. They mechanically crunch up the material and you can kind of reuse it for some things, but it's never as good a quality as that first time. That problem has been solved. There are ways now to use, without incineration, without producing any greenhouse gases, you can use a high pressure kind of kiln to bring those plastics back down to an oil material that can be used just as virgin material. So I think we're operating under some false assumptions about what the possibilities are, and therefore looking to close different technology gaps when we have actually that gap closed in itself. We've mentioned also just the customer needs gap. The customers are expressing an interest in having recycled content or not having something that's a single-use material, yet the business cycle continues to incentivize companies to produce those very things. And so we have to come up with incentives that will bring those into the market back together.
Brilliant. Well, it's good to hear that not the only innovation is AI, that we're having this technology that can actually help us save the planet and hopefully leave the planet in a better place for our kids. So it's good that the momentum's coming. Maybe you want to build on that point in terms of the gap.
Yeah, I think there is a market intelligence gap, right? So a lot of circularity can start at designing your products, designing your internal workflows. But if you have a lack of awareness of what the technologies are out there, whether it is new ways to recycle. Mold is a very interesting organization that uses robotics to disassemble products, right? Like, how can you leverage these technologies that are out there to help you with your workflows to move the agenda forward, so to say. And there is a consumer need. 20% of the younger generation want traceability, want closed loop systems, and want sustainability in the products that they purchase, right? So there is a growing consumer and customer demand, and even if that same mindset can be applied within procurement world, wherein setting some goals around take back from your customers, from your suppliers, or starting to measure the reuse rates within your organization. Yesterday, there was a lot of talk about direct procurement challenges and indirect procurement challenges, right? Sustainability, product carbon footprint analysis, et cetera, has been very much focused on the products that are produced. But there's a lot of opportunity also in the indirect procurement world, in your business operations. There are many organizations out there who are starting to think about that, looking at their day-to-day business operations to see how can they introduce. These are small steps that don't require big innovation or big technological intervention or even an R&D intervention. So these are simple things like, hey, if I'm redoing this space, can 20% of this be reused, right? Instead of bringing net new products into a particular workplace, so start setting some small goals and I think yesterday we had a speaker who mentioned doing a whole lot of what if scenarios, experimenting and seeing what happens. I think sometimes we look at this problem as a monumental, unachievable type of a problem. Take small steps, iterate, and experiment, I think is a way to go.
I just wanted to jump on that and also come back to the kind of planned obsolescence model. You look at an iPhone, the materials, the physical materials in there can last much longer than the utility of the software and the device. And that's okay, it's just a different innovation speed. But what we have to do, and what I think Apple is doing a very good job is taking those handsets back, making a very proactive effort to take them back because, as I said, the ability to disassemble and reuse those very expensive materials is becoming better and better as well. So you don't necessarily have to lament planned obsolescence when we want to applaud those rapid technology cycles. But what we want to do in addition to that is make sure that the molecules that get caught up in that excitement come back and can get reused for the next generation. We're smart enough to do that now. We look at other industries like aluminum. I mean, aluminum has almost an 85% recycling rate simply because there's a single process. It's designed for recyclability. There's a single material, and it's very easy to separate that out. So all we have to do is do the same 20 or 30-year innovation that they did for aluminum on plastics, and that's what we're about 15 to 20 years into right now.
Yeah, Google, I think, Moonshot Factory, they have actually come up with a way to leverage AI and image vision technology to identify at a molecular level what kind of plastic it is. So you no longer, I mean, every day at home when I'm trying to recycle my plastic containers that are inevitable, I have a hard time figuring out which ones go in which bin and what do I do with it, right? So this is taking away that the cognitive load of decision making that can be scaled, right? So there are technologies that are available that help with these types of evaluations. Speaking of planned obsolescence, like I think it kind of like naturally goes into the question of urban mining. In the US alone, there's 6.9 trillion tons of e-waste generated every year. 6.9 million metric tons of e-waste generated every year, and 4 million of that is usable material, valuable materials. And the monetary value of that is apparently $12 billion every year that can be, so there is a huge opportunity for innovation as well when it comes to, we all have, phones in our drawers, and, but there is an opportunity with, business procurement, IT procurement, wherein, you go through your laptops and your devices so quickly. Are there measures in place to bring them back into the cycle so that those precious materials can be leveraged, right?
No, it's interesting. It'd be great to maybe get into different industries and where there has been some really big steps in terms of circularity. I'm sure you both have some industry kind of examples. Maybe you could talk about something you've been involved in.
Well, I think there's been a lot of interest in having more recycled content in general, but it's surprising where it comes out because you have to have kind of high value applications in order to really make that business case for it. So what we've seen, for example, is a lot of our our members in the chemistry business. They make paint and other coatings for automobiles. That happens to be something that's very easy to swap and make entirely based on bio-based materials. And it happens to have a kind of a great marketing appeal for the automaker because they can talk about the recyclability or the renewability of that paint. And it also has it usually is a very high price point area. So a marginally small increase by changing the feedstock doesn't change the picture so much. Anything that is high volume, like mattresses or seat cushions, anything that's set up to have a large, long life, is now very likely to be subject to recycling. And in fact, this is where procurement can come in. Instead of just asking for the polyurethane foam, you also ask for an end-of-life solution of some kind, either a retrieval by the original manufacturer or a third-party logistics partner who will come and pick it up. But you incorporate that into the RFQ or the RFP, and then suddenly you have end-of-life options that you didn't even have to innovate. They just come from your suppliers. So I think that's a very exciting time. We have a lot of assumptions. We went through a number of years where we removed aluminum and rivets and things from a car, and that made it much lighter and more fuel efficient. But in order to keep the car together, it used a lot of adhesives and things were very difficult to pull apart. So now this next generation is making those adhesives and kind of lock, almost Lego brick assembly, so that things are designed to be taken apart, because that was never part of the original thinking. But if you put that into the requests into your supply chain, suddenly you get really interesting pop rivets instead of adhesives that are very difficult to take apart. And that makes the business case and the amount of money you can make at the end of life higher. And so that's where the money comes from and the justification.
Yeah, I think the design for disassembly is one strategy, but thinking of circular business models and looking at cross-industry collaboration, right? There are some really amazing examples where a pharmaceutical company's incinerated sludge waste or ash can become a feedstock for the concrete industry. There, if you are a brewery, your grain waste can, become feedstock for biogas. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for cross-industry collaboration, and also like looking at within your organization and look at how the waste that your organization is producing, whether it is by products or through your operations, how can that feed into? So you mentioned end-of-life requirements. I would like to reframe that as end-of-use requirements, because many times, especially in the IT, the data infrastructure for all of these AI agents, the components are getting replaced with net new components, but the older components could find a home in a second. So they're not, in theory, an end of true quote-unquote end of life. They are really end of use for this said organization, but they could be valuable for somebody else, right? So I think end of life, this is where kind of thinking in terms of extending the life of a particular product really comes into play. And what could be, I think another example is a medical device manufacturer. They, the hospital systems in the US are using whatever, handheld ultrasound scanners and so on. An older version of the same scanner can be now sold in other, global markets, because they don't have anything to begin with. So they can benefit at least like version 2 of the said scanner, while the more modern spaces can leverage the newest version, right? So that's where like thinking in terms of end of use. So if you have, like as a procurement individual, you can look at the products and anticipate how long you intend to use it within your organization, and also start thinking about, well, how can I monetize from this, or how can I create community impact by facilitating a second or nth use of the same product.
So Brian Solis was on the stage yesterday, and I did a podcast with him, and he came up with this really interesting phrase, WWAID, what would I do with AI? Sorry, I got my letters wrong, right? Okay. And it's interesting, and I'll put that proposal to you, is if the procurement execs here are thinking about circularity, is there a way that you could use AI to kind of fast track looking at your category of spend or your supplier base to start looking at solutions and so forth, or is it more complicated using AI?
Well, I mean, AI doesn't immediately give you any easy solution for anything, but it's a great tool to amplify the kind of instincts you have, or at least to explore them without having to go through real-world innovation cycles. And so I think that it accelerates innovation. And I do think in this case, for example, if you had a long spec sheet of maybe you're selling toothpaste and you're going out to your suppliers to get all the things you need, you might want to pass that through an AI first and say, hey, is there anything that can be reclaimed of all these ingredients? Is there anything that could have residual value that it's going to be between the supplier and I to broker who gets that value? And so if you go in without knowing, hey, this kind of carbon could be used in a future process, even though I consider it a waste material, suddenly that's leverage. That's negotiation leverage, that you're creating something of value that somebody can then turn into cash. And so I think that that's an interesting way of looking at it, because often the problem is that the utility of the second wave of a material is not often in the same industry that it was for the first wave. And so if you have a cycle and you think, okay, we're done with this material, you have no idea that there's another industry desperately trying to find that material and desperately trying to please their customers with getting renewable versions of that material. So AI is a tool to, without having to hire agents that understand every industry around you, can quickly do that scan for you. And if something seems promising, then bring in the experts and go do some collaboration.
I think matchmaking, right? Like there are many B2B marketplaces. There are many brands who have launched their own Second Life marketplace, like Harley Davidson is one, and IKEA has a furniture, a Second Life furniture marketplace. There are, it's been relatively common in the textile industry, looking at Poshmark or these other types of secondary marketplaces. But I think the matchmaking is the challenge, right? So one large technology company has a lot of warehouses and there's conveyor belts that automate their warehouses. Those conveyor belts have an end of use for them because they have the next gen conveyor belt coming in. What can be salvaged out of the previous, because there's precious materials in there, and finding a buyer for that is a challenge. I think this is where AI can help with the matchmaking to, go scout out there and find where can this particular product that's reached its end of use or even end of life find either a second home or a secondary use case, become feedstock. But I think there is also, the design for disassembly is a key component to help with this, right? Because without the ability to disassemble products very easily, this becomes a challenge and yet another barrier.
That's right. So I think sometimes these movements are also driven by individuals going kind of above and beyond in their organization to build a business case and try. Maybe it's getting on the LLM and looking at those supply side. Any guidance you have of someone in the audience today who wants to take that step forward, whether it's a word of support or how they can get others to kind of buy in the movement as well?
Well, if I may just take a moment and take a step back to thank the procurement specialists and the procurement officers of this country and our companies. It's a very difficult task, especially going through these shifts and these transitions where suddenly your product folks are saying, can you get me a material and I want it to have zero carbon? The procurement officer is the one that has to really say, well, wait a minute, when you say zero carbon, what do you mean? And let's put that not in a document, but in a spreadsheet so that our suppliers can come back to us. And so you're almost counselors, psychologists, advisors for people going through these transitions because you have to get it down to actual spreadsheet detail. So thank you for the progress you're making. And I think this is where AI can help you in that conversation with your internal customers. So, okay, so you want something that has X or Y environmental values, but let's look at what the market allows and what the market can offer in these areas. And let's maybe not just sit back and hope that somebody's making it. Let's put a demand out there that we're proactive about and says, this is what we're going to be going for. If you can bring this to us, you'll have a commercial relationship with us. And it's not always about the nickels and dimes, because if you're looking at a long-term deal, there's always price control there, price power.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, I mean, introducing simple parameters in your next purchase order or RFP that you put out to, are your products designed for disassemble? It could be even an information collection and might prompt your suppliers to start evaluating that as a net new requirement coming from you, right? Introducing, are your products or are your services facilitating take-backs, for either IT equipment or even more recently, like workplace services and business operations, they are putting out RFPs to request more product as a service-like model. So nudging these, introducing these small changes in your RFPs could start help you identify and get an understanding of what the market is capable of today, and maybe nudge your suppliers to start thinking, in that direction, and that's what starts the journey.
Brilliant. One final question to you both. We all fly back or train back or however we get back to our offices something on Monday morning that procurement practitioners or as individuals here we could do to step forward in circularity? Sushma, or maybe you have a...
Check your junk drawers for old phones or cables and find your local facility that can accept those materials and products so that you can start, take a personal step in that direction.
I think I've got a few in the drawer there that I could definitely take the step on Monday on that one. Mitchell?
I would say, take an old RFP and run it through LLM saying, was there anything I could have done here to ask for more circularity outcomes? And don't try to, play with your current business. We know the work on the table is very critical, but take some case studies of your own saying, are there things that we could have gotten out of this that we didn't that ends up producing more value for our shareholders?
Brilliant. Well, thank you both for sharing with everyone here. I'm sure it's been very insightful for them. I'd love to catch up with you and have a longer conversation because I could definitely speak for hours more on this. So hopefully we can catch up again. But thanks again for all your input and sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.